Hi, Rich. How you doing?
I'm good.
So, Rich, there's a lot of stuff to unpack here after your reveal. Lots of stuff. First thing I want to talk about is when you guys decided initially to go to Necrom and how you decided you were going to do Apocrypha and how you guys tackled that. Because I know you went into the Dragonborn DLC for some inspiration, but that was only part of it.
One of the best ways to kind of walk through this is we always look back at what we've done before we kind of move forward in terms of kind of figuring out what we want to do and the types of stories we want to tell and so on and so forth, because we want everything to feel different. And so when you look back at High Isle, it was kind of very traditional fantasy. It was a little bit more grounded storyline, grounded in reality. It was more about politics. So we wanted to kind of blow the doors off on that. And as we started kind of figuring out what we could and couldn't do or where we should and shouldn't do, Hermaeus Mora actually came up. And Hermaeus Mora is, a really cool Daedric Prince. They're all about knowledge and collecting that knowledge. But they also have this really cool kind of cosmic horror vibe, this Lovecraftian feel. And we haven't really explored that. So we knew that's kind of where we wanted to go. And then we needed a place to kind of put our story, and it just made sense to go back to Morrowind, to go to the Telvanni Peninsula, because the Telvanni Magisters live there, and they're some of the most powerful mages in all of Tamriel. So it was just kind of this good, and this is going to sound buzzwordy, but kind of good synergistic match between, the kind of the cosmic horror and Hermaeus Mora, and then Morrowind and the Telvanni.
And you folks, your teams learned a lot from previous chapters. What was one big lesson you took from the last chapter and applied it to Necrom?
I think the biggest bit of feedback that we got was that some of our more veteran players started commenting that High Isle felt a little bit too formulaic in terms of it's the same kinds of things, telling the stories in the same kinds of ways. People liked the story, but they just felt like it didn't really surprise them, and they wanted something to surprise them. And so that's what we did with this year. And it's going to be very interesting to see how players react to it. I think it's some of our best storytelling ever. It's definitely some of the coolest visuals we've ever done. And when you incorporate kind of the new class on top of that, it's just going to be, just a fantastic.
Yeah, speaking of the new class, I think every fan of ESO Online, well, they're always pounding their desk because they want that new class. But talk about some of the prepping and how you may create a new class to fit the theme of the expansion, as well as how it affects the entire game's ecosystem.
Yeah, it's definitely challenging. Balance is one part of that, where, how is this going to fit in with all the other ones? We wanted to make sure that the class played different. Like, it looks and sounds extremely different, but it also needed to play different. It couldn't be this kind of the same thing. And so we spent a lot of time on that, but there were also a lot of technical challenges that you have to figure out, and a new class is hard, and it's new art, it's new animations, it's a whole bunch of new memory that needs to get reserved on the client. So it was a lot of work kind of under the hood that the engineering staff had to do for a long time. It took them, about a year to really dig into that and get us the ability to do this safely. And so, it was an interesting challenge to do kind of both things at the same time for this class.
Now, in terms of other classes in the game, you always try to touch on like one class every expansion a little bit. Like, obviously the Necrom class is what you're going to focus on this one, but what are some of the other things that other classes like the Warden might get in this new expansion?
Really, the focus is on the Arcanist. We've done some balance things. With update 37, we focused on some of the kind of the big mechanics in terms of like light attacks, and also with block to try to improve the quality of life there. And I think, at least based on the feedback that we've gotten on PTS so far, we kind of hit the marks there, and people are really happy with those changes. So, we'll continue to monitor that stuff. We do have some balanced things, but there's no major overhauls coming.
It's a never-ending cycle, right? Hey, we brought a new class, great, but what about my class, right? Every expansion.
And you read the forums and people are like, just delete this class, it's completely unplayable. And you see that feedback for every single class in the game, and it's like, I'm pretty sure we don't have to delete every class in the game, like they're all valid. So it's, I get there's passion there, right? And there's people that feel strongly about certain things, but there's also a lot of hyperbole out there as well.
Mhm. You're kind of cryptic in your overall roadmap, right? You say new game system. Like, what does that mean? Does that mean new profession? Does that mean new mechanics for certain other characters? Like, what does that mean? That's very cryptic. I like it.
It can mean anything.
Anything
right?
is possible.
Like it could literally mean anything. But the ultimate goal is something that's a little bit more systemic, something that gives players a little bit more to kind of dig into. You know, with the quests are fantastic and the stories are fantastic. We're never going to stop doing that. But for a lot of players, it's kind of one and done. You go and you do it once, and then you don't do it again, unless you play alts or you have some other reasons to, you know, maybe go and look at some of the choices. So for that kind of fourth quarter update, we want to get something that's a little bit more systemic in there. So I teased kind of, you know, dungeon runner with a friend in the global reveal, which I won't talk about at this point. You know, we're going to let the chapter settle in. But those kinds of things, those systemic type things.
You're introducing a combo system, which a couple of MMOs have tried in the past, and it's an interesting system. But correct me if I'm wrong here, but I was watching, it's kind of a reverse combo system where you have like visual cues about how many times you have to do something. Then when the runes are gone, that's when you can do your big attack. Is that how that works?
Well, so it is a combo point system. So there are some builders, there are some spenders. You know, with us being ESO, there's morphs, so you can kind of change those. Some abilities that don't necessarily have a builder or spender aspect can be morphed into that. But the big difference with us is anything that's a spender you can always cast even if you don't have Crux. So what the Crux does, or the combo points do, is they add potential functionality to the ability. So, you know, they could add a little bit more damage in the case of a damage ability, or reduce the cost. Or, you know, do something else. You know, the example that I've kind of been giving, because I've been healing a lot on the Arcanist, and I really enjoy the healing, is one of their heals is this kind of beam that you can aim. So you're targeting people with this beam and hitting them and healing them, which is fun by itself. But when you morph it to be a spender, not only does it heal, but it also returns stamina and magicka back to the person that you're healing. So that's just kind of one example of it, but there's lots of abilities that kind of fall into that. And one of the reasons we went with kind of this system is we wanted the class mechanically to play different and feel different for our veterans. But it's not a hard combo system, so that newer players can get in and just use the abilities. And, you know, you can always cast this ability even if it's a spender. It'll just do something different if you do have the Crux.
Can you talk about the aesthetic design of that system? Because you're very visual and cues with this game. You know, a lot of people look at like a bar, or they look at like a gauge that has like a 1, 2, 3, whatever. They have like numbers, right? But you're very immersive in your world and in your combat. Can you talk about how you developed that combo point system, maintaining that illusion of, like, you know, without having to look at a bar being like, oh, I have 4 exactly in the bottom right hand corner, and this is where I'm stacked. It's actually on the character itself, correct?
It is, and that's something that's kind of been one of our biggest pillars in terms of design, is we want you to play the game and not the UI. And we've kind of slowly relaxed that over time, and we've added more things to help those players that like to, you know, have the UI help remind them, you know, in terms of ability timers and things like that. But it's still a huge part of kind of our DNA. And so with the class, we wanted to make sure that you could see when you have generated Crux. And there are essentially these little kind of triangle thingies that float around the character. And then when you spend Crux, those little indicators that are floating around you go away. So it's really easy to tell when you have them, when you don't. And that helps into just learning when and how to, you know, generate and spend them, and when's the best time to potentially use that heal that returns resources, right? You know, you probably want to save that and use that when you have 3 Crux generated instead of none or 1.
No, I'm curious because you can play your game in third person or first person. If you're in first person, how do you see the Crux, and was that a challenge?
It has certainly been a challenge. That's something that we've talked a lot about in terms of how do we ensure that the animations and all of the effects work in first person. We're still going through that stuff, but we've got some pretty good ideas.
That's awesome. And previously you released archaeology and your card game in the world of One Tamriel as well. You talk about like what's it been like seeing players do that up until this point, and what you've learned from it to improve it moving forward.
So with Tales of Tribute, we weren't. I mean, we knew it was a good game, and we knew we were really excited about it because we were holding tournaments internally, and we've never done that with anything we've ever done up to that point. So it was good to see that players embraced it. They really enjoy it, and given us tons of feedback over this past year of what they'd like to see. The balance problems, cards they would like to see tuned or tweaked, and so we've done a lot of that over time. We've added a lot of kind of quality of life improvements to the card game, and we've also added new decks. And so we're going to continue to do that. We have a new deck coming in the chapter as part of Tales of Tribute. And yeah, as long as players are enjoying playing that and want more stuff, we'll continue to support it. Yeah, it's, the Antiquity system in general is something that players really dig on, no pun intended there. Where they just, they love the exploration aspect. That's one of the big bits that we get from all of our players is they love the stories and they love to explore. And that's what Antiquities really is a part of, is going through and discovering new lore and getting cool items and tchotchkes and furnishings and things like that. So pretty much every update, we've added more Antiquities, especially at the chapter level. We've added a bunch. So yeah, that's another one of the systems that we continue to support and add to.
Apologies, I called it archaeology. That's the WoW in me coming up. I'm sorry.
No, I get it. Yep, I get it.
So, and then the last question I have for me before I get into the community questions is the one I always have to ask you, Rich, every time. So, any plans for cross progression and or crossplay or a paid transfer in the future?
I mean, it's going to be the same answer, right? Like, it's a huge technical thing. I think it is more likely that account transfers will happen in the future than any kind of cross-play type thing, just because of those technical challenges. It's a huge undertaking. We made a lot of decisions back in 2007 that we probably wish we didn't. We're a lot smarter now. But yeah, it's a huge undertaking.
Perfect. And when does Necrom come out? When can people experience this new expansion?
In June. So it's the first or second, I think it's June 6th on PC. Becca might be able to help me with that. And then it's 2 weeks later on console.
Right. Because you got to make sure you get all the things nice and finely tuned for certain.
That's right. That is right.
No, it is important that, like, it really is. I'm going to read you the community questions after this, but yeah, you're right. I just like asking that question because I think it needs to be hammered in people's heads how difficult it is to do that. Like, it's expected now, but in 2007, what was crossplay?
Right. And I mean, even, it's expected now, and I'm saying that in air quotes, but first parties don't like each other. They don't like working with each other. It's a hard thing to do, and they all have their own things, and navigating that is difficult. And if you're kind of the big dog on there, you can force it your way through, kind of like what Fortnite did. But it's still a challenge to get through.
Yeah, like I know for crossplay on console right now, like Sony and Xbox refuse to have their logo shown on the console side. Like, so you see a controller instead, because they're like, you can't have our logo on that system. Like, it's weird, right. Weird petty stuff.
It's tough.
All right.